Crowdfunder weekly webinar. Si and I are here today to talk to you about how to create a great crowdfunding project and the steps you need to take to get there. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through some slides with you. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. So we're all about turning great ideas into a reality, your great ideas. And I'm just going to go through quickly a little bit about Crowdfunder. So we're the #1 UK's rewards-based crowdfunding site. So we mostly focus on rewards, but we do a little bit of community shares as well. A little bit about that later. So we've got a really good success rate for our projects on Crowdfunder, and that's because we really care about helping our project owners run really brilliant projects. So what is crowdfunding? We have, there are lots of different types of crowdfunding, and I'm going to tell you about 4 of them today. So you've got equity crowdfunding, which is where you sell a percentage of your business in return for funds to grow that business. You've got lending, which is most often focused on peer-to-peer, mini bonds, a type of crowdfunding around those areas. And then you've got rewards, which is our favorite crowdfunding. So it's the only type really that's really good for startup businesses and organizations. And we've also raised over 11 million now for thousands of UK projects. And then you've also got community shares. This is a different type of crowdfunding where big organizations, community projects work with the crowd and they become owned by the crowd. So that's a different type of crowdfunding. But today we're going to be focusing on rewards-based crowdfunding. And this is best explained by example. We like to talk about Phil from Leeds Bakery. He's a brilliant guy who decided he wanted to set up a bakery. And actually, the banks laughed him out of the room. They said, there's no way you're going to compete with Asda or Tesco's. We're not going to help fund your bakery. Phil didn't take no for an answer. He needed 8 grand to get 2 bread ovens. And so he decided to turn to his crowd, and he created a project on Crowdfunder, reached out to his friends, his family, his local community, and he raised over £8,000 from 114 people. And what Phil did was he offered bread in return for cash. So anyone who pledged on that bakery might have pledged to receive a loaf of bread a week for a year, or bakery courses, things like that. Brilliant project, great example of how to run a crowdfunding project. When you crowdfund, it's not just about raising money. It's all about the awareness and the people that get involved in your ambassadors. So what you're doing, other than getting that money, you're creating a marketing drive for your idea, for your project, which is really brilliant. So that's a real benefit to your project. You're getting validation from the crowd. So what this means is, if people like your idea and they're pledging on your idea, they're validating what you're doing, and that can go a very, very long way. You obviously, at the end of a successful crowdfunding campaign, you get your funding, which is brilliant. But maybe most importantly, you get your advocates. So those people that have pledged on your business idea, your charity, your social enterprise, those people will stay with you for such a long time because they really believe in what you're doing. And by pledging, they've shown that support and they've shown that belief for you. So you get your great marketing, you get validation of your idea, you get your funds, and obviously you get your advocates as well. So how does crowdfunding actually work? It's pretty simple. You create your project on Crowdfunder. So you go to www.crowdfunder.co.uk and you click Add Project. Once you fill in all the steps, which Si's going to take you through in a moment, you then share your idea with your crowd and they pledge cash in return for your rewards that you're going to offer, and then you get funded. So I want to show you very quickly what a project page on Crowdfunder looks like. This is a brilliant campaign that we ran earlier on this year, and it's a cricket club in Cornwall that were looking to raise funds for their new nets. They needed I think they needed about £3,000, but as you can see here, they've actually overfunded. So you can see here, you've got your project home, you've got an update section to update all your backers on how your campaign's getting on. You've got a comments section where people can write little words of support and positive notes and encourage other people to pledge as well. You've obviously got your backers, people who have backed your campaign, and people can message you direct from your project page as well. And then on the right hand side, you can't see it on this page, but below it'll be your list of rewards. So over to Sai to tell us a little bit about how to crowdfund your project.
Okay, thanks Jess for such an eloquent introduction to Crowdfunder and what crowdfunding is. This is the section of the webinar where we're going to talk a little bit more about how to actually do it and the things that you need to be focusing on to create a crowdfunding project that has the best chance of being successful. So in front of you there are 6 steps. They are numbered 1 to 6. That doesn't mean that you need to do them in order. It doesn't mean that 1 is more important than 6, but you should try and cover all 6 of these steps before, during and after your crowdfunding project. So if we go to the first one, which is building a team, the team's really important when you are crowdfunding for a number of reasons. The obvious one is the bigger the team, the more skills you have within that team, and the easier it becomes to do lots of different activities around crowdfunding, some of which we'll go on to a bit later on. The skills that you can see in front of you on the screen, people who can do marketing, people who are particularly digitally savvy, as crowdfunding is mostly done online. Anyone who can coordinate and drive the project, someone to make a video, for instance, they're all valuable skills. Not only that, but the larger the team, the more people, the more networks you have to reach out to in your crowdfunding project. So if I was running a project, I know I have my own friends, family, organizations that I'm a member of. And if I have 5 members in my team and all 5 of those people have similar numbers of friends, family, organizations that they're part of, then that crowd that we can reach out to is really, really big. So the more people you can get in the team, the better. Share the load, share the burden, and make life much easier. Once you have a team, we need to figure out what it is that you are actually trying to do with the project and how you can convey that message to people who might be interested in supporting you. There's 2 ways that you can do that on a crowdfunding project. The first is via a written description, and the second way is through a video. So I'm going to start with the written description because it's slightly less boring than the video. So there's 3 things that you need to cover in your story, 3 things that a backer will want to know about your project. First one is, what is it that you actually want to achieve? What are you trying to do? Second one is, who are you and what do you do outside of this specific project? And the third one is, how are you going to use the money that you raise through the crowdfunding project? Those 3 things are really important for a potential backer to know, perhaps before they will commit to pledging on your project. So with that information on the page in a written description, it's really important to break it up. So you don't want to have all of those 3 points, one after the other, in a huge block of text. Make sure that you use paragraphs, use subheadings and headings, use images if you can to break up the text and make it really manageable. So if somebody wants to find out more specifically about how you're going to use the funds that you raise, they can skip straight down to the heading, which talks about where the money's going. They can find the information that they need really quickly, and then they're going to pledge much quicker than if they have to read through a huge block of text, which we all know is quite scary. So the second way that you tell your story on a crowdfunding project is via a video. You don't have to have a video, but if you do, on average, you're 50% more likely to hit your funding target. It's a really good way of putting across passion that you perhaps don't get in the written description. And it's a really strong way of creating an emotional connection with a potential backer. There's a few key things that you need to take into account when you're doing a video. First is keep it as short as you can, while still giving the relevant 3 points of information, what you're trying to achieve, who you are, and where the money's going. What you don't want to do is have a 6-minute video, because lots of people will turn off after 6 minutes. So 90 seconds to 2 minutes is plenty of time for a crowdfunding video. Number 2, get some faces in front of the camera. It's really important that I, as a potential backer to your project, can see who it is who's actually running this project. It's a very powerful way to show me that there are real people behind it and there's a lot of passion going on. So don't just do an image montage or show the building that's being repaired or the football ground that's getting new floodlights. Make sure you get someone explaining what is actually happening in front of the camera. And the third thing is try and be as prepared as you can when you're doing a video. There's lots of people who might tell you that you can put a video up really quickly and it doesn't matter, because if it looks quite amateur, then people will potentially feel sympathetic and you might get the pledge that way. I'm not one of those people. I don't really agree with that. A lot of people who are looking to pledge on your project will click play on the video as the first thing that they do. And you want that first impression to be as good as possible. The general idea is that if I'm watching your video and it looks as well made as I think you can make it, that gives me some confidence that if I give you my money and give you pledge on your project, then that money is going to be spent in as good a way as possible, and lots of effort will go into the actual spending of the money and the delivering on the project as you've done in the video. So we have now spoken about pulling a team together and creating a compelling story in the two mediums which you can tell that story on a crowdfunding project. The next thing, and this is probably the most important thing that I would advise you to do before you go live with a crowdfunding project, is to try and figure out who's actually going to pledge on it. Who do you know who would be interested in pledging? And who do you not know who you think might also be interested in pledging? And when you're thinking about who it is who you can drive to the page, or the kind of person that you'd like to get your crowdfunding project in front of, try and draw it out into a big map. So in front of you on the screen, you should see a few circles that are overlapped like a Venn diagram. You could do it that way if you want to. I quite like doing a sort of exploded tree diagram. Whatever's most comfortable. What you're trying to do when you're identifying your crowd is figure out who it is who you can put the project in front of, who it is who you think would be interested in pledging, who you don't currently know, and how it is that you can reach out to those people. So that's identifying your crowd. It's really important to draw that network map out before you go live. So hopefully now we've figured out who it is who is going to pledge on it. We know what the story that's going to compel them to pledge is, and we've got a team of people helping us put all of this together. We need to start thinking about what rewards are going to incentivize everyone who visits the page to actually pledge on it. It will probably look something like 5 to 12 rewards at a range of values. Most people will start at £5, and a lot of the projects that I've worked with will have a top reward amount of roughly 10% of their target figure. For example, if you are going for £5,000 as your crowdfunding target, you need to try and think up a top reward that's around £500, 10% of that financial target. And then space out the rewards in between. So you might choose to go £5, £10, 25, 50, 100, 250, 500. And that's your set of rewards as general price points that you should be working at. There's some reward ideas on the page that hopefully you are seeing. I won't go into too much detail about individual rewards because there's literally thousands of reward ideas. What I will say is when you're trying to think up what rewards you can use, make sure they're good value. Don't try and flog a printed t-shirt for 75 quid, because there's something in the human mind which goes, even though this is a really good project and I really like what they're doing, 75 quid just feels like a massive rip-off. And if you can, try and build in exclusive, unique, one-of-a-kind rewards at the higher end, something that you can't just buy off the shelf or pick up from anywhere else, something that is exclusive to the projects that you're doing. When you're deciding about how to approach your crowdfunding project, there's two ways that Crowdfunder operates. as fun in terms of funding models. The first one is all or nothing, and the second one is keeping what you raise. It's an interesting decision as to which way and which route you go down. Keeping whatever you raise is the less risky funding option, so it's quite popular for that reason. However, I would strongly advise not going for keep what you raise unless you are a charity and going down the all or nothing model. We do a lot of work on data analysis here at Crowdfunder, and the latest data that we've pulled has shown that all or nothing, or projects under the all or nothing funding model, will on average raise 5 times more than those projects on the keep what you raise funding model. So back yourself and go for the all or nothing funding model, and if it pays off, it will hopefully reward you with around 5 times more than what you would have raised in the flexible funding or keep what you raise. Given that everyone who's listening to this webinar and looking at the screens is now going for all or nothing, that means that setting your target is really important. It's quite an important exercise to make sure that you get right, because you don't want to go for something ridiculously high, not reach it, and all of the money get returned to the backers. Obviously, when you're setting your target, you need to consider how much it is that you're trying to do is actually going to cost, and make sure that you cover all of those costs. But one good way of looking at what a good target figure would be is to do a little bit of math. We know on Crowdfunder that the average pledge amount is 50 quid. So if we were to take a hypothetical target and divide it by £50, that gives us the number of backers we need on average to achieve that financial target. If you have a target of, say, 10 grand, and we divide that by 50 quid, that means on average you need roughly 200 backers. So by now you should have, when you're looking at setting a target, you should have an idea of who your network is, and you've drawn that network map out. If you go back to that network map and see that you've got 20,000 people that you can get the project in front of, and on average you need 200 backers, then setting a target at 10 grand seems like a realistic and achievable number to hit. If, however, you've done the network map and you have 10 people on it, and we know that on average you need 200 backers to get to 10 grand, then maybe try reducing the scope of your project, take something much smaller, which doesn't cost quite as much, or put the project on hold and try and build that network map up until you have a solid number of people that you can reach out to and a good chance of hitting that target. So something else that you need to make a decision on before you go live is how long you want to run the project for. You have the option to run it up to about 8 weeks on Crowdfunder. I would wholeheartedly recommend that you do not run a project for that long. That's a really, really long time, two whole months of crowdfunding. What is much better is to run a short and sweet project. The optimum seems to be about 28 days, so 4 weeks on the nose. The reason why that is, and that's what the graph is depicting in front of you, is at the start of the project, you will tend to get a flurry of pledges because the project's brand new, it's really exciting. And if you've done some of the work on identifying your network and you've built up your team, then you'll have a good number of people who will pledge on the day that it goes live to help you get off to a good start. At the end of the project, where you can see the right-hand side of the U-curve there, you'll tend to get a lot of activity and a lot of pledges coming in because the project's just about to close. So everyone that you've spoken to over the 4 weeks who said that they will pledge realizes that they've only got 72 hours left to do it, so they go ahead and get it on there. In the middle, and this happens to every single project, there is a plateau where the project is neither exciting and innovative enough nor time sensitive enough for someone to go and pledge straight away. If that plateau lasts for 6 weeks, for instance, which it may well do in an 8-week project, you're, number one, going to find it very difficult to dig the project out for a really strong finish. And number two, run the risk of annoying people by putting very similar, will you help me fund my project messages in front of them via email or social media or down the local pub, whatever that might be. So if you're running a project 28 days. Now we know how long the project's running for, what our target figure is, who we can reach out to, what the story is and who the team is. We're nearly there. We've pretty much got the page. We just need to figure out how to actually get it funded. And the only way that you can get a crowdfunding project funded is to drive the crowd to your page. And the best way to do that is through marketing. There's a good trick to marketing, and the best crowdfunding projects do this. They reach out to a relatively small number of people initially, the people that they're best friends with, their family with, they are working with, the people who are most engaged with a project, and they get them to commit to pledging straight away. And the trick that makes the difference with a successful project and an unsuccessful project is that they then get those people, once they've pledged, to share it within their own networks. And then they're so good at convincing those guys to share it with their networks that they in turn convince the people who are sharing it to share it with their networks, and the project gets amplified. And it's a very natural and organic way of getting your project out, and it amplifies it up by quite a few multipliers by the time you finish the project. What you don't want to do is reach out to someone who's a total stranger and get them on the project at the very start, because it's unlikely that they'll pledge unless they can see that there's some money already in there and there's some backers that trust you, and that you can get the ball rolling on your own. So you use those people who are really engaged to pledge first and then share, and then the people who they've shared it with pledge and then share, and you amplify it outwards into potentially a vast number of people. How does that actually look when you're marketing it? There are loads and loads of options for marketing. We don't have time to go through all of them in detail today, but there's a ton of information on Crowdfunder in the how it works section. So head over to there if you still have any questions at the end of the webinar, or just ping in a question which we will answer towards the end. I will highlight a few of them which I think are really good. On the left-hand side, we've got ideas for marketing before you go live. In the middle, the launch event, that's when you go live. And on the right-hand side, when you are actually live, things that you can do to market it. So before you go live, pick up the phone is a really important one for me. You're trying to reach out to the people who are most engaged, and you've got to persuade them to pledge as soon as the project gets live. The best way to do that is to call them up and tell them exactly what the project is, give them a really personalized message, and make them feel like they're a really big part of what the project is. The second one that I think is really important is asking for feedback before you go live. It's a really good idea to get someone's opinion on what the project page looks like, and see if they think the rewards are any good. What would they pledge on? How much would they be willing to pledge? All of that's super valuable information before you go live, because it could be the difference between you getting those guys to pledge and share it, or you not getting those guys to pledge and share it. The launch event, super important. Make as much noise as you can when you go live. Tell everyone that you know, and if you can get everybody in a room together, buy everyone a pint and get them to pledge there and then. If you've got an iPad or some laptops that you can take with you, that's really good. And when you go live, email database is my important one for marketing. Social media, using your website, doing posts as local press, they're all very, very valuable. But the first thing that you want to do when you do go live is not to put it on Facebook and Twitter, but email the people who are most engaged, remind them about the phone call that you had a week before you went live, and say, we're ready to go now. You did say you'd pledge, you've got to get it on now, and get them to pledge as early as possible by sending them a very personalized email. Then make sure they share it, and then you can go through the motions of the other getting funded marketing ideas. So this is just something to show you, similar to what Jess started with on the project page before I dove into how you actually set up a successful crowdfunding project. When you do go live, you will have access to a dashboard. The dashboard looks a little bit like this, and it's a number of key stats and information that will help you figure out how well your project is going. Some of the key stats that you'll get might help you make decisions on how next to market your product. For instance, you have access to where are all the pledges coming from. If you've got lots coming from Facebook rather than from Twitter, then you know to focus your marketing strategy more on Facebook than Twitter. And those stats on the dashboard will help you do that. So there are my 6 steps to crowdfunding success. Build a team, share the workload, create a story that's compelling, easy to understand, and include pictures. With the video, keep it short and sweet and be as prepared as you can. Identify who it is who you can put the project in front of, who's most likely to pledge on it, and then try and figure out who the people are who you don't know but you think would still be interested in pledging on it, and write all those down in a huge map, as big as you can. Then look at rewards, what's going to incentivize each of those different audience segments to pledge. Make sure you've got a good range from £5 to 10% of your target figure. When you come to set your target, make sure it's manageable. Take a hypothetical target, divide it by 50 quid. That will give you the average number of backers that you need. Remember to go for all or nothing if you are launching a project. And top tip would be do it for 4 weeks, 28 days when you come to setting up the duration. And then there's a whole host of ways that you can market the project, but make sure you engage with the people who are most interested and most likely to pledge first, above and beyond everyone else. And you can do that by picking up the phone, sending them really personalized email addresses, and inviting them to a launch event. So that's sort of my top tips. Jess, if you want to run a project, what do you do now?
Well, so all that information is so brilliant, and I'm hoping that there's quite a lot of people out there that are just ready to go and add their project and get started. So what do you do next? You get a team together, find out who's going to be on your team, who's going to help you crowdfund your idea. Make a really strong plan, and there's plenty of information on crowdfunder.co.uk to help you do that in the how-to section. Get that project added on Crowdfunder, because you're in the system then, you'll get emails, you'll get support and advice, and then go ahead and get your idea funded. So that's a really, really short touch information session on how to get started. So now we're about to answer some of your questions, which you will have sent us. So bear with me whilst I get the screen back to us. So there we go, stop that. So there we go, me and Si back in the room.
Hello.
Hello, and I'm just also going to find out what questions we've got on at the moment. So bear with me a second and I will be able to get them up. Right, hang on, sorry, it's usually up on the screen for me, but I seem to have lost it. Right. Oh, I can't see the questions. Hang on, this should be coming through on my phone, so bear with. Sorry about this, guys. Right, here we go, Si. Some questions for you.
Some questions, cheers.
I need a lot of help with a business plan and a model, and I was wondering if anyone at Crowdfunder could help with that, and that's from Aziz.
So creating a business plan is not really our specialty. But there are loads and loads of organisations out there who can help you with that sort of thing, some of which we are partnered with. I would recommend having a look at Starticus. They are a really good community of entrepreneurs, and they will be able to point you in the right direction for creating a business plan and looking at different business models. Virgin Startup is another one of our partners who you should definitely have a look into.
They're both brilliant partners of ours. Thanks, Si. So Paula, hello Paula. Hi guys, I'm part of the Cambridge Refugee Resettlement Campaign, and we really want to set up a crowdfunder project to help fund our campaign in order to have some money for when the refugees are already here. I've got lots of advice on this one. I mean, that's kind of, the question is, as rewards, as a volunteer group, we don't really produce anything. We're having issues setting up our reward scheme, especially those for people who pledge more than £10 or £20. Any experience you've had with groups like this?
Yes, lots. And there is a whole campaign that's dedicated to projects just like yours. It's really easy to find on Crowdfunder. If you scroll down to the bottom of any page on Crowdfunder, in the footer, there is a link called Fundraising Ideas. If you click on that, you'll find a section that's dedicated to people raising money for refugees, specifically in Calais. Have a look at those guys. There's no such thing as stealing in crowdfunding, so have a look at what they're doing, have a look at the ones that have been successful, what's worked for some other people, what perhaps hasn't worked for other people. Figure out if you can offer similar things to what has been working on previous projects, and if you can, then they would be good places to start.
Paula, I reckon you should also reach out to your local community, so the businesses in Cambridge that might, for example, a pub might donate a meal for 2 people, and that could be one of your rewards, or anyone in your team that's got skills. So in Cornwall, a lot of projects, they might know someone who's got a surf instructor on their team, so maybe he gives a few free lessons, and that's a reward that you put up on your campaign. So I think just don't forget to be really creative with those rewards, and don't think it doesn't necessarily have to be something tangible. It could be a shout out on Twitter for £5, or I don't know. People will want to support what you're doing, so just get creative with your ideas. Thank you. Hopefully that's answered your questions, Paula. So Lisa, hi Lisa, so is asking, can a person break a bigger project into segments?
Yes, you can, absolutely. If you need to break it into more manageable chunks, then that totally makes sense. What I would suggest is not running too many projects back to back, because you run the risk of reaching out to the same audiences too many times, and they could get a little bit annoyed about doing that. So the last time we ran the data on this sort of thing, it seemed to be that about 7 months was the optimum time, or the time that you need to leave between running projects. But if it makes a difference between you hitting 2 individual smaller targets and compared to going for one massive one that you can't hit, it's a much better strategy, and I would recommend breaking them down into smaller chunks.
So another question that we've just got in, somebody's asked if we can re-watch the webinars, and yes, absolutely you can. They'll be on our website in the how-to section, and we run these webinars weekly, so you could always join in next week if you're after more information. So Paula's enjoyed answering the question, thank you. And George is asking, can I run concurrent projects, or is it better to run a long one?
Neither is my answer to that. So you don't run a long one, because you run the risk of having a long plateau and annoying people. It's also it's a long time to dedicate yourself to doing anything. 8 weeks of just focusing on this is a really long time, and you run the risk of potentially burning out yourself. Don't run concurrent ones either, because then where do the people that you're reaching out to go? Which one do you point them at? So my advice would be to break it into smaller chunks and do one now and one in 7 months' time, or to build your network up as big as you possibly can and try and hit a big fundraising target in one go, put everything you've got into it.
Also, it's worth remembering, George, that if you do have a very big project and you're looking at breaking it down, maybe look at the funding mix and maybe see if you could run a crowdfunding campaign to find match funding as well. That works really well. And obviously, we work with people like Virgin Startup, we work with funding bodies. There's always lots of opportunities around crowdfunding, and it unlocks further funds. So maybe that's worth a thought. There's a funny question next, so maybe you'll enjoy answering this one. Why do we have surfboards behind us?
Well, can we do this?
Yeah, we can try it. Give it a go.
Hopefully you'll be able to see this.
You have to hold it there for a second, or else it won't.
So we are based in Newquay, which is on the north coast of Cornwall. And we all love to surf, and given that the beach is outside of our window and the surf is looking amazing, it's much easier to keep a whole bunch of our surfboards there than it is to travel home and get them in our lunch break.
It's also worth knowing that we've got offices elsewhere in the UK as well, but our HQ is in Newquay, which is pretty incredible. Back to a serious question. Susan is asking, how do I know which payment gateway to use?
You should try and use all of them. So there's three options. One is called PayPal, which the nation knows and loves. The second is called Stripe, which is very similar to PayPal. It's sort of the newcomer on the block, but a very good and very slick service. And one is called Go Cardless. They've all got their own benefits. So Stripe, for instance, allows people to pay by debit card, just as you would on an e-commerce online shop. Go Cardless is set up more of a direct debit, a one-off style direct debit. PayPal is a family household name brand. So if you can, and you can set up accounts with all three of those, then you should do that. If you can't, I would recommend going for probably PayPal and Stripe are the most used. But if you're doing those two, you may as well just get a Go Cardless account as well.
And just to put that into context for anyone else that's listening, when you set up your crowdfunding project, you get asked how you're going to take the money, so which options you want to use. So those were the three that Si mentioned there, which is PayPal, Stripe and Go Cardless. So that's what that was about. Another question. Somebody's saying enjoy the surf because their husband used to surf when he was a young man. Great.
Good.
We definitely will do that. Okay. Another question is, Carol's asking, is there a really good day to start a project of the week, a day of the week?
Yes, there is. It sort of depends on who your network is, though. So if you are predominantly reaching out to people who work the 9 to 5 in the office, then it's probably a good idea to reach out to them midweek rather than on a Saturday or Sunday, when a lot of people who work behind computers will be as far away from a computer as they can be. So it sort of depends on who it is that you reach out to, and just try and think logically through, if you were that person, when would you most likely to be sat in front of a computer and have some free time to watch a video and pledge on a project? Generally, that will be midweek, I think.
That's brilliant, Si. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of your questions today. That's it for this week, and we will catch up with you all again if you join us for next week's webinar. Cheers.
Great.
Thank you. Now I need to figure out how to. Cheers, everybody.